And we're live. We're live. I'm Aaron Davis, and this is How the Music Business Works podcast. It's a brand new podcast. And so this is a little introductory video about who I am, about what we're going to cover. And it's a request. It's a call for guests. So if you fall into any of these things, or you're curious about talking about any of these topics, or contributing an idea or perspective, I'd love to have you on, and we can talk about things. So a little bit about me. I grew up in North Carolina, and outside of Raleigh, to two loving parents. My sister is wonderful and she's lovely. And I went to school in Wilmington, UNC Wilmington. Ultimately, I found my people in rugby and in the business school. I also did a little bit of student government. I was the senior class president my senior year, but I thought that was a really great experience. But in high school, I wasn't as engaged and found myself a little bit bored and kind of into some mischief. That's probably pretty generous. But in college, I really started to fall into I really sort of fell in love with school and learning and business. And I started my first business when I was in college. It was an ATM machine company, and I owned a few ATM machines. I put them around town. I put them on campus. And that was a good business. And then college was great. I found rugby was really, really great. And then I stayed in town in North Carolina for a couple years after college. Ultimately built a house just outside of town with my family. We built this beautiful home. And it was it was a group effort, but I lived on the property during the build. And so that was a great learning experience as well. After a couple of years, I started another business, which was I had the ATM business, and then I started a minor league football team, which was, as a young guy, was totally exciting and made zero money, but it was an incredibly exciting experience, and it was just fun all the way around. Ultimately, around 2005, I got a call and sort of, I don't want to say I got recruited, but reached out to some people that I'd met along the way in rugby, and found myself in Santa Monica at Santa Monica Rugby Club, where we played really, really great rugby. I was surrounded by guys that were incredible. We had our coaches were fantastic. The management, everyone was just, if you've ever been on a team where every position is a stud, that was on the field, off the field, the fans, the whole schmear was amazing. And we won the national championship in 2005. We won it again in 2006. We kind of played like jerks throughout the season, but that's sort of a weird way that the matrix, somebody lost, and a point differential, this sort of stuff, made it such that we snuck into the playoffs, and then we won out again in 2006. So by the third year, the band kind of broke up, but it was incredible. Some of those, these guys are they're my brothers. They'll be my brothers for the rest of my life, and I feel so honored to have been able to share the field with them. But so great rugby in the United States, on tours around the world, and that was just really terrific. But by about 2013, I was ready to hang up my boots, and I was ready to call it quits. And so I'm living in LA. I literally had broken my ankle overseas, and came home. I had to stay overseas for a little bit because I had to have surgery, and I couldn't fly with this crazy broken ankle and all this sort of stuff, and came home. And one of the first people that came around was my old friend Renee Meredith. She had been one of the photographers for Santa Monica Rugby Club. And she brought me around a jar of beer and was like, welcome home. How you doing? And I'm like, look, enough about me. I'm frankly, I'm tired of loathing myself. What's going on with you? How you doing? What's happening? And she starts getting into, if I see one more Miley Cyrus Wrecking Ball video, I'm going to do my head in. I'm like, what does that even mean? And so there was this new thing that where artists and songwriters and different people that had an interest in music were able to monetize things. It was called YouTube. YouTube had been a thing for a number of years, but they hadn't turned on the monetization switch. And so they had just turned it on when we're having this conversation. I was kind of, I had done sort of light engineering, project management, building a simple website, or helping somebody think about building a simple app or connecting pieces of the web. I kind of grew up with the web, of course, but so my experience in running a software company was relatively low. Most of the folks I worked with were out, were contractors and other freelancers and folks like this. And I was doing that as a younger guy, basically to go play rugby. I sold a little bit of real estate. I got my real estate license when I was in Los Angeles, which allowed me to travel. I'd make some money. I'd do a little bit of SEO or build a site or do something sort of rudimentary so that I could go play ball. And it was off to the next place to go, season or tournament or travel or what have you. A lot of it was just to play rugby or to go to the World Cup or this sort of thing. Again, a lot of fun. It didn't have a lot to show for it after it was all said and done, except for some really good memories. But in thinking back on it now, I might not have changed it a whole lot. It was good. But when simultaneously, I'm after I'd been back a little while, prior to leaving, and then after I'd been back a little while, I started going to a meetup. There was a news site called Hacker News, which was sort of the community for Y Combinator, and they had a pretty active website community forum that people were hanging out and talking about sort of this intersection between entrepreneurship and technology and SaaS and all these sorts of things. And it was sort of new, I mean, it was pretty, you heard about companies that had become big companies, but like Microsoft and AOL and this sort of thing. But as far as like building your own tech company and hosting your own software and databases, and Amazon, AWS was brand new, I believe, at the time. But in any case, I volunteered. I went to a meetup that was the LA Hacker News meetup, and which brought a bunch of people together in Los Angeles. And I hung out there for a little while. And then as the fellow that was running that decided he got a job out of state, I raised my hand to run the meetup. And so I grew that meetup quite a bit during the next 3 or 4 years. And ultimately convinced Renee to leave her job and join me. And we started a company called Exploration. And our thesis was that the majority of the music business focused on the artist, on the label side. And remember, there's 2 copyrights in a song, right? There's the publishing and there's the label rights. And so the composer, the songwriter, the composition, the music publishing largely gets ignored, or did at the time. And it was sort of a reactive business to the label business, because historically you sell a record, the record store pays the record label then pays the publishing, and then the publisher then pays the artist or the writer. And so it was very reactive. When digital became a thing for the first time in this very sleepy business, because remember, publishing is older than the recorded business, right? People were writing songs and had copyrights before they were able to record a record. So it's a very old business. It's very sleepy, right? It didn't change a whole lot over the years. That when digital became a thing for the first time in this very old business's sort of life, they were able to sort of control their own destiny. And so they were able to then go make claims and submit data and resolve conflicts and do all these sorts of things that we're going to talk about later on the podcast. But some of them were ill-equipped to do it. They just didn't have the experience, right, of dealing with all this data that was suddenly mandatory in order to collect your money and get the attribution that one deserves. So I'm kind of witnessing this thing. I've been studying startups, and I've been seeing, I've been sort of thinking about it, and I'm reading everything that Paul Graham's writing, and I just, I've seen what YouTube has done over the last few years. And I said, Renee, and of course I'm 35. Also, I'm looking for my next thing to do, and how am I going to do it? Now that I'm not going to be a full-time, Muppet running around playing rugby. And I say, Renee, I think we should start a business. I think we should do this. And it was an interesting sort of chain of events. A buddy that I'd played against in New York. Of course, I played in LA. He played in New York. he was involved in a similar thing at a big company in New York. And as I told him about this thing, he's like, I think you might be onto something. You and Renee, with her background, of course, she went to Belmont, started on Music Row in Nashville, worked her way up, survived a couple big mergers, and then they flew her out west to be head of mechanical licensing for this massive company. And she had an incredible, sterling reputation in the business, had been doing it for a long time. And so I just felt like, there might be an opportunity here. And of course, I had a broken leg. Renee's giving me her books from college to read. I'm reading this stuff at night and I'm asking her all these questions. I'm being a total pest. But I learned, how some of this stuff worked. And, you subscribe to every blog and you read every white paper and you follow all the people on Twitter and LinkedIn and what have you. And you just kind of dive in. There's no other way to do it really. But it didn't take long when she said, okay, I think you might be right. I think we might be right. We could do this together and it could be great. And so Renee and I started officially in January of 14. Exploration is a copyright administration company, primarily for songwriters on YouTube. That was our first deal. And it was very much a penny business. The publishing, they talk about it as sort of a penny business. And what we realized is that there were a lot of writers out there, a lot of publishers that weren't ready for this digital sort of transformation. And that as someone that had lived in software for a time, in her experience as a copyright administrator, music publisher, she had this encyclopedic knowledge of how the rights work together and how they all interact, and then the rates that were associated with them. And it just incredibly complex, but Renee seemingly was able to tie a lot of the, connect all these dots together. I was looking at it through the lens of software and of business development, that I thought that there might be opportunity there, not only for ourselves to enrich ourselves, of course, but also for a lot of folks that were not ready and frankly ill-equipped to do this sort of thing. So it started slow, but a lot of great things do, I suppose. And fast forward 10 years, we're going to celebrate our 10th anniversary this year. And it's millions of copyrights under management around the world, from half a song to public PROs, music publishing companies, record labels, songwriters, artists. It started just for publishing on YouTube. Now it's a full suite of music publishing administration, label rights, and quite a few other things that we're going to get to on the podcast. 4 years ago, so kind of marching along, 4 years ago, I've got some, I like real estate. I had my license when I was out in California, and I've always sort of, I asked my buddy Rob, as we started to grow and started to make a little bit of money. I had, 15 grand. And I was like, I've never had this much money in my pocket before in my life. What do I do? And Rob, my buddy Rob Knox, he's like, you go and you buy a modest rental house. And so after I got my license, this is a little bit of a diversion, but I guess it's important for the full Monty. I started to try and do a deal. I did it for 10 years as a broker. And then after I no longer was interested in being an agent or a broker while I was in California, I wanted to do a deal each year. So I wanted to buy a rental house, or I wanted to trade from one of my properties into something that was nicer or better positioned or more valuable or what have you. There's a lot that we can get into about how a service business that makes cash along with real estate, how they can work together for tax efficiency and for profitability. And there's a lot of opportunity to be had there. And so that has been sort of my business. And so I started buying these little modest rental houses. I left LA after Exploration's cranking along at about year 5. It's really starting to take off. And I moved from Los Angeles to Nashville. Of course, I grew up in North Carolina, so I wanted to be a little closer to family. I was 40 and I was just ready for a change. I'd been in LA for almost 15 years, and was ready for a change. And so I moved to Nashville. I'm building the business. I'm starting to buy a rental property, and I'm sort of just disenchanted. I don't understand fully what's going on in with the bookkeeping for the real estate, and I just I'm like, I'm getting pretty good at managing copyright and collecting the royalties and paying them out each month and frankly, being able to account where's this money coming from, where's it going, how does it work, what is that, how are these pieces connected, and why wasn't I able to have these same questions answered for a simple, modest rental house across town? There was only one, and so I felt like I can probably figure this out. And so, as sort of a side hustle, I started to do pretty basic bookkeeping. First myself, then I hired somebody. We got my personal books and the real estate books together, and or just tidied up more. And the amount of rigor there went way up. And as sort of I marched forward, a couple other folks were like, "Hey, I need books. I need help with my books. And can I get a hand, or can you consult with me and help me clean it up?" And I was delighted to do that. And I was sort of thinking to myself, that this could be a profitable business in and of itself, separately from Exploration, the copyright administration, and these rental houses. And so as that began to kind of take form, I ultimately I thought that a couple of our clients, Exploration clients, came forward and said, "Aaron, we want to sell ourselves. We want to take ourselves to market." It's like, okay, fantastic. We're here for it. We want to be there for you, and however we can do it. And so they were very, very rich deals. They were very large deals, and I'm thinking, okay, hundreds of millions of dollars. We were the administrator. We had no principal position in these deals. We were just the administrator. We were collecting the royalties each month. But these things were being brought to market at the hundreds of millions of dollar level. And it was the first time I'd seen this stuff. And I'm like, okay. And I'm in the room as these deals are taking place, representing the seller, and then ultimately there for the deal, helping them put together everything to ultimately do the deal, clean up everything, make sure the pipeline is there, make sure every comma and identifier and everything is just right as it relates to the royalties that it's producing, historical, present day, all this stuff. Where's it in conflict? Where are there potential suits? All kinds of stuff. And put together this diligence package, and then it sells, and then retained by the buyer, the seller, that was financed by Wall Street, financed by private equity, financed by family offices, old classic music company. It was a myriad of people that were coming together, and in the business we call that an interested party. So all these interested parties, and it happened twice. They kind of happened back to back, and it was like, oh my gosh, like, we're doing well as administrators, but maybe there's an opportunity with this in this other realm. And so, in other words, maybe there's opportunity in actually acquiring these catalogs. And so time's kind of marching forward, and I'm doing this. Exploration is doing the copyright administration. Business Frame is doing the accounting and bookkeeping. We're marching along. A couple people are kind of, have asked me, "Hey, can you help me with my books? Can you help me put together? I want to sell my small business. Can you help me sell my small business?" Sure. We're going to put together a little package for you. I'm witnessing these deals come across, and it's like music deals. And I said, wait a second. There might be an opportunity to acquire. Renee, my partner with the administration companies, Aaron, I think this is a great idea, but I just personally don't want to be involved in it. I give you my blessing. Exploration, obviously, that'll be good for exploration because you'll be bringing anybody there. But I would prefer not to be involved. But I give you my blessing. And so I was sort of just, I was thinking as I was thinking about it. One of my best friends, Miles Feinberg, who had been an attorney and led the LA office for music sales, which became Wise Music, beautiful blue chip publishing company that had some beautiful copyrights, um, old school, classic, standards, just fantastic. He ran their LA office, and he and I, they were one of our first clients, and then we, and then we, we as we continued to work with them, he and I just became friends. Ultimately, he left music sales and was doing broke, became he was on the buy side. He was buying catalogs at music sales. He left there to become a sell side broker to help folks sell catalogs. And so I'm just talking to him about the desire to potentially buy a catalog. Meanwhile, a very, very small catalog, another one of our clients making about 60 grand a year said, Aaron, big corporation called, they want to buy it. I want to consider selling it, but you get first right of refusal. And I'm like, this is killer. What do you want for it? And it's like, I want, let's do, it was making about 60 grand. Let's do 5X. They wanted $300,000 for this small catalog. And it was lovely. We administered it. I knew the catalog, but I just wasn't in a position to do it. I couldn't pull the trigger on the day. Ultimately lost it, but that was really the catalyst. I realized as I'm explaining this to Miles, if he's got, we kind of came to this conclusion at the same time. If you got something that is worth 5 million, 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, no shortage of people, resources, infrastructure, lending, analysis, all these pieces that are in place to service the high end of the market, right? But if he had another catalog that was making 60 grand a year, they wanted a 10X, they wanted to sell it for 600 grand, and he couldn't give it away. That no one was interested. You couldn't get a loan against it. It was too small. It was $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to do an analysis, evaluation. And so it rendered that catalog, the value, it compressed the catalog value dramatically because it was so expensive to do this. And he had a lot of trouble in ultimately selling that and had to sell it for really cheap because there wasn't facility. And so all this sort of stuff is happening at the same time. We're marching forward. COVID hits. Everybody's kind of scratching their head, like, what's going on? What's next? And Miles and I just thought that there might be an opportunity to buy smaller catalogs. There's really not a lot of facility at the lower end of the market. And so the bookkeeping agency that I had been running for a couple of years at that point, we pivoted hard to do catalog valuation so that we could quickly process a catalog valuation, understand what the value is. Exploration is still cranking along. Business Frame is now focusing primarily on catalog valuation, and Tuesday Music is born. So that's present day. And so Tuesday Music is a music company that is acquiring smaller music copyrights, smaller catalogs, smaller songs, and sort of our sweet spot is about 1955 to about 2005. It's a big area, but all that to say, not necessarily new topical stuff. We're not developing any artists or anything. It's more acquisition of older stuff that there isn't, there currently isn't a lot for those folks. So we felt like it was an opportunity. So that's I can speak fluently about those things. I like to spin a yarn. I grew up in the South. We sat on the porch and we talked about life. And I'm always down to have a good conversation. I fancy myself easy to talk to, and I like to have a good time. And so music catalog or copyright administration, music catalog valuations and what goes into selling one's catalog. I feel pretty capable to speak fluently about those things. Also, real estate, rugby, sailing, Nashville. I live here with my wife, and we have two cats, and we have this funky homestead that we live in that we're kind of fixing up. It's an old house, and so we like to travel. We like to make a little bit of art. Um, and I just, I guess this video is just sort of telling a little bit about my story and about how I got to here, with a podcast in mind. And so I'm looking for guests. I want to talk about copyright. I want to talk about music. I want to talk about the business. I want to talk about the art. I want to talk about the journey, how people got involved, what's coming next, what went on way back when. Um, I like to think that, I wrote a book, or one of the authors of How the Music Business Works. It's a book by the same name. It's a textbook on how all these pieces work together. That will be its third edition will be dropping in a couple months. Right now it's December 2023, and so in February, I believe we'll have them all in print. We'll be releasing the new book, the third edition of How the Music Business Works. And so it's a nonfiction book about, almost 50 chapters about all the different facets of the business. What's an ISRC? How does it relate to an ISWC? What's a composition, or what's HFA or MRI or PRS, Jazz Rack? What are these things? How should I think about what happens if my music gets played on YouTube in Oklahoma versus downloaded on Apple, on iTunes in Japan, versus on the radio in South Africa? What are the plumbing, the financial plumbing of the business? How do they all work together? With a catalog valuation, how is the catalog currently being represented around the world? How is it in conflict in places and for different license types and in different territories? And is there a reversion expected in the future sometime? Are all of the videos and streams and different databases around the world, are they exhaustive and thorough? Are conflicts resolved? All of these things, go into a catalog valuation. After all of that data and the financial data, the metadata and the financial data have been merged, how do we think about that? It's a discounted cash flow is one approach, as it relates to valuation. The other is market comparable. How does it compare to other things that have sold in the market? And then taking those two things together for reasonableness and giving one a range to say we believe, or it could be between these numbers, can oftentimes be very helpful in understanding what is it that I have here. If you got a house, it's easy to get an inspection, a title. You're going to get a title policy when you buy it that stipulates this is the boundary of your house, this is your land, and the escrow is going to help make sure that everything is just right. But from the bank and everybody, there's all kinds of infrastructure and pieces of that puzzle to buy a piece of real estate that ensure that says, okay, if I pay you this money, this is what I'm getting in return. And I can see it right over there. There's a house right there, right? That doesn't exist with music. So how do you, when you're buying something that's an intangible property, intellectual property, you can't touch it. It's an idea. It's like a patent or a trademark. It's a copyright. What am I buying it? How do I buy it? What am I buying? How is it held? Is it custodied somewhere? How does the world know, or that guy or YouTube or anybody else, how do they know that I need to be paid $3 this month or whatever it is, right? So all of that is sort of uncovered in evaluation, and ultimately that's sort of the final part is what happens when you sell? What happens when you divest? What are the tax implications? Ordinary income versus capital gains. What happens when who's involved in selling it? How much does it cost? How long does it take? What is the preparation? What do I need to have in place in order to consider selling my catalog? All of these things um, are important, and they allow, having this sort of knowledge allows you to avoid a ton of pitfalls and just shape shifting, which the music business is really quite famous for. So hopefully that'll be helpful for folks. I've done a lot of different things in my life, and I'm curious about a lot of different things. But I think that I'm quite proud, and I'm humbled, and I'm honored that art is my job, and I've devoted my life to it. And so these businesses that are they really complement each other really well, and they all kind of are. They offer. They're not. They're definitely church and state. They're not related, um, but there is an opportunity there to get perspective and to be able to offer value to our clients as we're moving forward. So, How the Music Business Works is a brand new podcast. I'm the host, Aaron Davis. I'd love for you to come and join me either in watching, subscribing, or perhaps joining me on the pod and talking about some of these things. And yeah, I really appreciate you for tuning in. I hope all is well in your world. See you down the road.